Hi guys, Yuki here, back with Seduce Me to the Demon War demo. We are going to finish this up with Matthew. The last on the list, but certainly not least. Anyways, let's keep going.
This has gone on for long enough! I will not let them trap me in a corner like this! Azira!
Matthew's mother.
Husband.
You're still here. Why have you not left like the others?
What do you want?
Do you honor our marriage?
Why should she? I mean, you basically just kind of married three other women, took in a harem girl, and were very abusive.
I don't know. Did you honor our bond when you slept with that whore?
I said, do you honor our marriage?
I do honor it, unlike you.
Then you still stand by our bond?
Why are you asking me these questions?
Because I need your energy.
What? What do you...
I'm giving you your physical form back. You should be thankful.
What? What are you?
That certainly isn't gonna give me nightmares. I only could stare at what was in front of me. I could hardly believe it was real, but there it was right before my eyes. How had my life even gotten to this point? As I gripped the pen in my hand, I let my mind settle into the situation. My fingers gently slid over the pen's surface, nervous and softly shaking. This was happening.
Hey, is everything okay?
I glanced up to see Matthew, looking at me with worry. I could only shake my head and smile before signing my name on the paper in front of me. Looking at my own name made me somewhat giddy, especially since it was next to Matthew's. So what do you think? Matthew looked over and gently rotated the paper on the table to look at what I had written.
Thank you for coming to our wedding.
What's wrong?
Nothing. It's just really cool to see our names together.
I felt a blush run across my cheeks. Was he thinking the same thing I was? Looking at our names together made me feel warm and fuzzy on the inside. Looking at Matthew, he was grinning ear to ear, which made me do the same. His smile was practically infectious.
Anyways, we are very happy you could all attend. It means so much to us that you support our step forward, and we hope you enjoy the reception. That sounds good, right?
Yeah, that sounds good. Wedding preparations were nothing like I expected. I had organized parties before, but my own wedding had become a new foreign adventure for me to figure out with Matthew. Invitations, budgets, the dress, the ceremony venue, the reception hall. It was all crazy. Still, I was glad to know that I was able to do this with Matthew. He seemed as excited about it as I was. There was something missing, however. Hey, Matthew?
Huh? What is it?
Do you think your mom would approve of this? Oh, no. The curiosity of the idea had been eating at me ever since he proposed to me. I knew he wasn't a fan of his father, but his mother was a different story. According to him, she had always been supportive of him right up until he left. Matthew rubbed his head, staring at the table in thought.
Well, I don't know. I think she'd be surprised I'm marrying a human. But I think she'd be okay with it in the end. She is my mother, after all.
I think we're gonna have to save his mother. Or she might... if this is gonna turn bad, and I have a feeling it will, there might be a possibility that he has to choose between me and his mother. And if he saves her, or maybe she turns on him. That's just my own speculation, but that's just a feeling. Matthew only smiled and shrugged. I knew it was a bit out of left field to ask, but I was curious. I wished his mother could be able to attend the wedding, but I knew that would never be an option. Uh-oh. Huh? My thoughts instantly derailed as I caught a ghostly whisper that seemed to reverberate in the air. I couldn't pin down the location, but I knew that I had heard something.
Huh? What is it?
You didn't hear that?
Hear what?
I looked at Matthew in surprise. He didn't hear the whisper? He had spoken his true name. I shook my head and rubbed my temples. Maybe I was just imagining things.
Help me.
Yeah, no. I know it's gonna turn horrible. Either that or the demon lord is gonna use his mom against him, and there it was again. I stood up from my seat and looked around, trying to figure out where the voice was coming from. Who's there?
Whoa! Whoa! What's wrong?
Now I'm gonna look like a crazy person. I looked to Matthew. How could he not hear it? I wasn't crazy! Someone's saying your name. Matthew raised an eyebrow, unsure what I meant. Why didn't he get it? What was so hard to understand?
But I don't hear anything.
I know I'm not making sense, but someone keeps saying your real name.
My real name? Zakeru?
Yeah, she keeps saying it, and help me. Matthew slowly rose from his seat, looking down at the table in confusion and worry. I could tell he believed me, but wasn't sure how to respond. Are you sure you couldn't hear it?
I'm sure.
Matthew looked up at me and walked around the table to stand next to me, and I turned my body to face him. He looked into my eyes and gently brought his hands to my cheeks.
Does she sound like anyone we know?
No. I stared at Matthew, as Matthew continued to look into my eyes. What was he looking for? Eventually, Matthew leaned in and placed a soft kiss on my forehead. What?
I'll look into it, okay? For right now, don't worry about it and ignore it. It might be an illusion or something. This place is so full of magic, so it could be that.
He just blocked my magic so I couldn't hear that voice. I could tell Matthew was worried. He wasn't making sense. However, I knew that we had a lot on our minds, so this was something that needed to wait. Maybe he just wanted me not to worry. Still, I couldn't help but be worried about it. Matthew gently released me and gave me one of his goofy smiles.
Alright, well, I think that's enough work for today. Let's save the rest for tomorrow, okay?
I nodded. Today had been pretty stressful, so rest would definitely be good. Matthew led me back up to our room and got ready for bed. I, however, watched as Matthew absently ruffled his hair. Despite his kid-like demeanor, he was still a man, and he was the one I was going to marry. What was even better about our love was that we both loved every part of each other. I couldn't stop gushing over his eyes, his fluffy hair, his kisses. He drove me crazy just as he made me smile every single day I spent with him. It didn't help that he was also sexy underneath the baggy clothes he wore. No one was privileged enough to see him bare, and I was a lucky woman given that permission. A simple ruffle of his hair was enough to catch my attention, and I stared at him. I really loved him. A small fire burned into my core, letting me know of my sexual attraction to him, but I wasn't sure whether or not to go with my gut or just sleep. Tease him. Looking up and down his body, I really couldn't help but let my libido take control. I let out a soft moan, loud enough for Matthew to hear. He froze, turning to look at me with a blush across his face.
Huh?
Matthew, I was nervous, but I decided to tease him. I would have to go all the way. I began to slowly strip off my clothes, revealing my underwear and bra. Matthew's eyes darkened into a lustful gaze as I gently ran my fingers over my stomach and between my breasts. We did a lot of work today. but I don't want to sleep just yet. I gently leaned forward and climbed onto the bed on my hands and knees, letting him enjoy the sight of my cleavage. Matthew turned to watch me slowly, not taking his eyes away from me as I crawled forward to his side of the bed. I licked my lips, happy to know that my teasing was working. I finally stopped moving forward and got up on my knees, leaning back a bit and stretching my arms behind my head. Why not make the night a bit better with me? I almost couldn't recognize my own voice. However, I went along with it. He wasn't the only one in the relationship that could set a mood, even though he was the incubus. As Matthew stared, I felt a soft heat envelop my core and rush through my body, as another moan moving out of my mouth. I looked into Matthew's eyes, seeing that a glow, a loving but lustful gold. It slowly faded as the enthrallment he cast on me ran through my body, making me hotter. Matthew slowly began to strip off his jacket and shirt, letting me enjoy the show before he licked his lips. He knew exactly how to respond to my teasing, and despite it not being fair, he used his inhuman charms to make my mind melt at the sight of him. As he pulled out his shirt off of his body, he held it out to the side, letting me get a good look at his chest. I felt myself lick my own lips at the sight. Is it this one? That one?
Then let me make it better.
That was all he needed to say before coming over to me and crawling over my body, capturing my lips with his in a heated kiss. His arm wrapped around my waist as his other hand gently slid down behind my back and gingerly held my rear. I let my legs move out from underneath me so that he could kneel between them, gently grinding my knee against his. His smirk against my lips was as he gave me a playful slow grind with his hips against my core. My mind went crazy at his teasing foreplay. He pulled me against his body, squeezing me with his arm around my waist, before deepening the kiss between us. I let out a moan escape my throat and became lost in his mouth as he claimed my lips. Somebody is sending me pictures. It's being done. He pulled before deepening the kiss. I let a moan escape my throat and became lost in his mouth as he claimed my lips for himself. I loved feeling him touch me and hold me to him. He was the man I loved, and I wanted to give him everything as he gave me just as much and more. Our sex became just another way to express our desire and love for each other. Soon enough, we were both panting and moaning hotly as we made deep and passionate love. Our clothes were strewn around the floor, but our focus was in each other's eyes. He does have pretty eyes. His moans echoed mine as he kissed and nipped over my neck and shoulders. However, he'd always come back to stare into my eyes and kiss me deeply as he made love to me, as I made love to him. I loved him. I wanted to be held by him and be full of him forever. My heart belonged to him, and he was a dream come true for me. To feel his love for me was a blissful treasure I would cherish and experience for the rest of my life. He always knew how to find my sweetest spots and knew the ways to make me buck and scream his name. We rose higher in our pleasure and ecstasy until we both ran over our limits and ever so gently floated back into the loving feeling of our embrace. Matthew could only pant and hold me in his arms, sweetly petting my hair and kissing over my forehead.
I love you so much.
I love you too. My heart fluttered at the sound of my voice. He was my everything, and to feel him in my arms made me happy beyond compare. I happily embraced the darkness of sleep as Matthew continued to hold me in his arms. The darkness was meant to be peaceful. Sleep was meant to be relaxing. However, my mind began to wander to what had happened earlier that evening. Hearing that voice made me worried. Something was off. Something was going on, and I was the only one who could sense it. Why, though? I let the darkness seep into my mind a little longer, unsure of what to think of it. Should probably save. Yeah. Chains? What the? And that is Diana. I opened my eyes and found myself no longer in my bed, but a stone-cold forest staring at a high marble ceiling. Despite feeling foreign textures beneath my skin, I vaguely knew where I was. I was in the main hall of the Demon Lord's castle. I remembered the sight from the vision the boys gave me when Diana first appeared. Why was I here, though? Where? My instincts forced me to turn to the sound, and I saw someone I did not expect. Diana? Held in the air was Diana, hanging from 4 long lines of chains that were attached to her wrists and ankles. She was spread out like a star, and the chains were pulling her body in different directions, seemingly ready to rip her in half. My mind couldn't fathom why she was in this illusion, if this was one. She looked so different, but I could tell it was her. Why was she in chains though? Bleh.
Release me! Oh, I will.
Matthew! Yep, he looks like he's under control. That'd be terrible if he got also mind controlled because of his mother and the Demon Lord, and that was the whole point. And that's just me, and I have a really bad feeling that that might be a possibility. And I've been told that I kind of spoil things for other people without meaning to, just by using, I guess, my inference of what is to happen based on like everything else I've seen before. But who knows, maybe I'll be wrong this time. Matthew's voice reverberated with a cold demonic resonance, and it drew my eyes towards him in shock. There he was, sitting on the throne, practically lounging on it. He was still in human form, but his eyes were glowing in a naturally gold color. What was even more odd was that he was smirking at Diana. I'd never seen him smirk like that. Like he was enjoying seeing someone's pain.
I'll kill you once I'm bored of this game. Your struggle is just so much fun to watch.
You think this is funny, brat?
Matthew glared as the chains pulled harder on Diana's limbs. I flinched from the sound of her body stretching, almost hearing the sound of bones cracking. Diana, however, sneered at Matthew in reply.
Do you really think calling me a brat is going to help you?
Well, that's what you are. A brat who abuses his toys until they break.
I could only stare at the two, completely confused by what I was witnessing. I tried to speak out, but suddenly my voice disappeared before any sound could be formed in my throat. Gripping my neck, I looked down, trying to figure out why I couldn't speak. There was some sort of vice pressed through my vocal cords, not allowing me to mutter even a sound. Its weight made me choke, and I missed a part. However, I looked back up as Matthew gave a sickly evil chuckle.
That's right. I like to play with my toys until they're of no use to me. That's how toys work.
Matthew stood up slowly from the throne, and his lips curled into a devilish smile as his tongue ran along his upper lip.
And when I'm done with them, I destroy them.
And what of the human? Is she just another toy?
I looked at Diana, seeing her move her head to look at me, before turning back to Matthew in realization. I was physically there. I wasn't just watching the events. I was a part of it. Matthew looked back at me, and his face shifted into an innocent smile. My heart desperately clung to the possibility that he wasn't as evil as he was presenting himself to be. His smile pulled at my heartstrings, giving me hope that he was just playing some sick joke.
She's not just a toy.
I am just what he uses to replenish his energy. My heart dropped in my chest. Matthew tilted his head cutely, giving me a disgusting feeling of adoration and fear from the sight. Never had I imagined feeling this while looking at that one I loved, yet here I was.
She's my favorite toy. I can't break the toy that I have the most fun with. Especially when that toy gives me so much energy.
Like a predator, Matthew began to walk towards me, passing underneath Diana's hanging form. I couldn't move as he knelt down and cupped his hand around my chin.
I'll keep you with me forever and ever.
Fear seared my nerves. I did not want to be near this man. This wasn't Matthew. It couldn't be. There was no way. As he stood up, I felt tears run down my face. If this was a nightmare, I wanted to wake up. Please! Matthew's hand pointed at the throne and glided through the air back to me. The sound of chains echoed through the room, forcing me to follow it and see a chain flying at me. I tried to scream as it leaped toward my throat. From the thin air, a shackle collar formed around my neck, connecting to the chain as it reached me, and I was pulled forward roughly through the air before landing beside the throne with a painful thud.
No!
Diana screamed as a large cage suddenly formed around my body, making me its prisoner. I scrambled to my knees and gripped the bars surrounding me, now frightened beyond compare. Matthew let out a terrifying laugh, sending more waves of fright through my body. This wasn't happening!
This world is mine. No one can stand in my way anymore. Not James, not the Demon Lord, and not you, Diana.
Smirking widely, Matthew looked at Diana, raising his arms across his body.
And I've grown tired.
I don't know. Before Matthew could move, my fear and anger quickly bubbled in my chest, one word pushing past the blockage in my throat. Stop! As my voice ripped through the air, everything went black. My body, however, sat up in bed in shock from what I had seen. My screams reverberated through the room as I let it sink in that I was awake and all of that had just been a nightmare. Despite it all feeling real, I was no longer in a cage. I wasn't in a room with Diana being ripped apart. I wasn't...
Ah! What?
I shot my head aside to see Matthew in bed with me, sitting up beside me and rubbing his head. A heavy tiredness weighed down the eyelids over his frightened eyes, but my mind suddenly began to seize in fear just from looking at him. My mind shouted that it was just a nightmare, but my body couldn't have helped but remember that Matthew had done to me in that dream. It may have been a fake, but I couldn't stop the fright from washing over my nerves. Tears formed in my eyes as I stared at Matthew. I wanted to know that everything was fine, that I really was more than just a toy to him, but my voice wouldn't let me speak without falling. Matthew quickly rubbed his eyes and stared at me, his concern obviously deepening as seeing me in tears. He slowly raised his hands to embrace me, but I flinched away, causing him to freeze in place.
Whoa! It's okay. It's alright. It's just me.
Matthew's voice tried to warm over my fear, but my feelings were still conflicted. Despite my brain knowing better, he continued to stare at me, waiting for me to relax. I could only meet his gaze warily with both fear and sadness.
Hey, I'm gonna hug you, okay? That's all.
My heart wanted to believe him. I had to. He couldn't be as sadistic as my nightmares had depicted him. I nodded and Matthew slowly wrapped his arms around me, hugging me to his chest.
There we go. It's okay.
I began to melt into Matthew's arms, finally feeling the fear disappear from my body. I pressed my face into his shoulder, shaking in remorse as the panic drained away. I'm sorry. Matthew simply rocked me in his arms and nuzzled the side of my head with him. He occasionally planted a kiss over my cheek and shoulder, reminding me of his love and that everything was okay. His breath became a tempo for me to follow, letting me relax and feeling his love all around me.
Bad dream, huh?
Yeah. Matthew gave me a soft squeeze, snuggling up to me, and I gratefully snuggled back. He would never hurt me. I couldn't let myself be this afflicted by a nightmare. Hopefully he wouldn't ask about it.
Hey, whatever the dream was, just know that everything will be alright, okay? It was just a stupid nightmare. Whenever you wake up, I'll be right here beside you, ready to make it go away.
The way he sounded so confident made my heart flutter in my chest. He truly cared for me, and that was something I adored about him. He loved me, and I loved him in return just as much. I nodded and nuzzled his shoulder, warming into his embrace further. Matthew smiled and kissed the top of my head. As I closed my eyes, he gently laid us back down into the mattress and helped me shift to lie against him, making his chest my pillow. Thankfully, the nightmare didn't return that night. I was left with a warm embrace and a peaceful slumber until the morning rose. Even in the days that followed, the nightmare didn't come back. Neither did the mysterious voice. My week became peaceful, and final details of the wedding becoming our only focus. I was nervous for it, and soon the day of the wedding had snuck up on me, and I was in my room staring myself in my wedding dress. I could hardly believe it. I was getting married. My family and the guests were all at the church waiting for me to march in, but I was so nervous I hadn't left the mansion yet. It was only a 3-minute drive away, so it wasn't like I was in a terrible rush. Looking at the digital clock in my room, I marked the time. 30 more minutes. And let out a sigh. I had asked my friends to allow me to get ready on my own, so I was alone in the mansion. Yet even while I was alone, the anxiousness of the wedding made me nervous. Why? Was I just that excited? Running a hand over my dress, my fingers traced over the seams and intricacies of the design. It was indeed my wedding dress, now down to the last detail. My parents fronted the bill as a congratulations, which still made me laugh. How they had ever come to accept Matthew was a mystery to me, especially when he was incredibly vague about who he was. I blamed his incubus magic. Before I could wander further into my nostalgic memories, I heard my phone ring, ushering me to quickly answer. Hello?
Hey, Lucky Bride. We have a little bit of a problem.
Uh-oh. My mind quickly froze. A problem? What could possibly be wrong?
Now you're scaring her, Naomi.
I don't mean to.
Wait, where's Susan's voice? What about the rings? Huh, the rings? What about the rings?
Well, apparently Matthew forgot to bring them. He knows where they are, but you'll have to bring them with you when you come.
I let out a small sigh. It wasn't a big problem, thank goodness. It was something that had an easy solution. Oh, okay, that's fine. Where did he put them?
Well, he said he put the rings in his dresser drawer. He said it was so Simon couldn't get them.
Oh, so Simon's gonna make an appearance. Really? I rolled my eyes. Simon wasn't that bad. Besides, he was a doll. Sure, he was a doll that could move and stuff, but he wasn't evil, just a bit mischievous. All right, I'll bring them over. Meet me in the front of the church, and I'll hand them over before the wedding starts.
Got it. See you soon.
I hung up and smiled. At least the issue wasn't something outrageous. That would have been mortifying. Quickly, I rushed over to the dresser and opened the door, expecting to see the ring box in plain sight. What the... Well, I looked inside, but I found nothing except clothes. I opened each drawer of the dresser, checking each nook and cranny while moving clothes around to find the box. Nothing. Simon! I looked up and glanced around the bedroom, unsure of why Simon was laughing. He was really wanting to play a game right now? Damn it, Simon! I hacked up my dress and began to search the halls of the mansion, determined to find Simon. He had to have the rings, and I was in no mood to play around. Simon, give me those rings! He couldn't have gone far. I decided to check the floor before going downstairs. The office? Looking around the office, Simon was nowhere in sight. I grumbled to myself. Where the hell can that thing be? I sighed before leaving the office, walking towards another room. The library? Looking around the library, Simon was nowhere in sight. I grumbled to myself. Where the hell can that thing be? I sighed before leaving the library, walking towards another room. The bathroom? I stepped into the bathroom, looking around and hoping to find the furball somewhere with the ring. Alas, he didn't seem to be anywhere in sight. What the hell? I grumbled to myself before turning to leave. However, my eyes locked onto the bathroom mirror, seeing something that made my heart freeze up. Around my neck was a large tattoo-like mark resembling a blue chain. It was almost glowing over my skin, and the nightmare suddenly rose into my thoughts, reminding me of the fear I had felt. Staring at it, my body began to tremble as the mark seemed to snake around my neck like a moving shadow. For a moment I thought the mark would tighten around my neck, persistently watching it circle around my skin. I brought my hands to my throat, trying to cover it. I didn't want to see it. It had to have been an illusion, right? I was imagining it. I hesitantly removed my hands from my neck and sighed in relief to no longer see the chain mark. I was freaking out over nothing. I rubbed my eyes gently, relieved. Geez, I'm getting worked up over... However, as I looked back up at the mirror, around my neck was a blue collar. I reached to my neck and gasped as I physically felt the collar around my neck. Close my eyes again. It's not there. My imagination. Get it off? This couldn't be happening. This couldn't be happening. I wrapped my fingers around the collar and began to pull at it, trying to rip it apart and get it off my neck. It stretched slightly in my hands, but it remained fastened around my neck. I hastily ran my fingers around it, trying to find a latch or closure. When my fingers came up with nothing, I began to panic even more. How could there not be a latch? I needed to get it off of me. I don't even know. I pulled at it again, practically choking myself in efforts to remove it. The collar once again stretched in the direction of my pulling hands, but would not rip open. Get off! I nearly screamed, clawing at the collar and yanking it in different directions. Why was it on my neck? Why wouldn't it come off? At that moment, a word came up in my mind. I wasn't sure how it was there or why I thought of the word, but it appeared in my thoughts as if it was exactly what I was thinking about. My fingers began to tingle slightly as it resonated in my mind. As I opened my mouth, I let it fly from my tongue. I felt my body slightly warm in reply. Salvo. The collar, somehow responding to what I had said, began to quiver around my neck before fading into black mist and disappearing into the air. I instinctively sighed in relief. It was off. Thank God. I rubbed my neck, gratefully feeling only my skin and silently appreciating the sensation of my fingers running over my bare neck.
I knew it! I knew it! That girl has demon magic.
Well, that was more intense than I thought I was going to be at the beginning. I was like, there has to be more, because I felt like Matthew's route seems a little shorter than the rest. What the?
Then quit talking and let's take her! The Demon Lord will be so pleased.
Who? Before I could turn and search for the voice, I felt hands grab hold of my feet, and I looked down and lifted my dress. 2 pairs of evil-looking hands had taken hold of my ankles, reaching through a dark red and purple pentagram. I shrieked, trying to pull my legs away, but couldn't stop them as they swiftly pulled me into the ground. I was pulled deeper into the darkness. I was no longer in my room. I was being dragged down through a void, one that I couldn't escape. I reached out and clawed at the dark, trying to find something to grab onto. I tried to pull my legs away from the hands that were holding them, but I couldn't pull free. What was going on? What was this happening? Someone help me! As if someone had heard my screams, I suddenly felt the hands let go and disappear, leaving me to float into the darkness they left me in. I shut my eyes, feeling please let this be a dream, please let this be a dream. I finally felt a surface under my feet and collapsed onto it, my body curling in on itself from the experience I had. I didn't dare turn my eyes away from my lap, not ready to get up just yet. The voice I heard, however, made my heart stop.
You! What are you doing here?
I looked up, finally having the courage to take in my surroundings. My heart stopped beating for a moment, seizing in my chest. I looked up to see 5 figures, strangers, monsters, beings that I didn't recognize. They all looked down at me in surprise, as if I had dropped in at a very bad time. One man looked like an orc from a fantasy game without the tusks. He had a broken horns and a very frightening aura around him as he stared at me. The other male was lanky in comparison, more human-like, but I could almost feel power emanating from him regardless. One of the women who was staring at me had rabbit ears. Rabbit ears! They twitched on top of her head as she looked at me and gripped her staff. She seemed harmless, yet she had animal ears. The one creature I couldn't discern the sex of seemed more excited to see me than surprised. What freaked me out about them was that they had wings sticking out from their back and they were floating. The last woman, however, set off alarm bells in my head as I looked at her surprised face. Her hair. Her eyes. Diana? As she stared, the woman turned her body towards me in recognition to the name I called her. It was her.
What are you doing here?
Diana walked towards me and stared down at me. It was odd. She didn't look like a human, yet I wasn't afraid of her demon form as it towered over me. I was more in shock as to what was going on. Before Diana could speak further, most likely to repeat herself, a figure quickly stepped up and bowed to her, kneeling beside me.
My lady, please forgive me. I felt something moving between our worlds and assumed the Demon Lord was to blame, so I intercepted his summoning of this human.
You. So I wasn't the only one who felt the change in the air.
Diana stared at the man, kneeling beside me, as I kept my eyes up at her. As she turned her gaze back to me, I gulped silently. What was she going to do with me? This all felt wrong. I was about to be married. I was about to live my happily ever after with the man I loved. Now I was in a place I didn't know with Diana and a bunch of other creatures I didn't even recognize. My instinct was to, well, I've done everything, so I guess, just stay still. I couldn't move. My mind was empty of emotions except for fear. Why was this happening? Where was I? Why was Diana here? Diana stared down at me before sighing and kneeling down to my level. As she settled onto her knees, I leaned away from her, unsure of what she'd do. Was she going to kiss me again and take my energy? Knowing her, maybe.
Can you tell me what happened?
I didn't want to speak. I felt no courage to. My mind was so wrapped around this chaos that I felt nothing but fear and anxiousness. This couldn't have been happening. I was dreaming.
Is she okay? I don't think so.
This is a waste of our time. Just kill her or something.
Yes, because that's a smart thing to do. Kill someone who is clearly traumatized and has done nothing to deserve death. Brilliant idea. Bravo.
Diana continued to stare at me, waiting for me to answer. Why? She didn't cast a spell on me, nor did she attack me. She continued to wait and stare. Slowly my mind began to sink into the situation. Diana was willing to listen. Was she willing to help? That was another question, but first I had to answer her. My voice didn't want to answer still, so I forced myself to nod, wanting to answer her somehow. Diana smiled softly, which conflicted with my memories of her. She never smiled like that. Yet she was now. Diana held out her hand, ushering me to take it.
Can you stand?
I nodded again, and took her hand, standing up at last. I looked around the other beings in the room. They all kept their gaze to me, unsure of what I would do or say. Diana, however, led the conversation.
First, can you tell me what happened to you?
I took a breath, recounting everything that had happened. I was about to go to church to be married, and then I was attacked by this darkness. A couple of hands grabbed my legs and pulled me into it, and then I fell here.
A shadow summoning.
Diana turned to one of the beings, the lanky one, and glared.
One of yours couldn't have.
On my honor, it wasn't any of mine. We have nothing to gain from kidnapping a human. Nor do we know who this woman is, anyhow.
My lady, if I may, I clearly remember hearing imp demons in the void along with her. It must have been the Demon Lord's henchmen.
Those damnable creatures. That explains it.
Diana crossed her arms and looked to me again.
Well, dear, it seems that you were to be either a new harem girl for the Demon Lord to ravish, or bait for the boys to return to their father's side. Either way, I doubt you would have lived long had the Demon Lord gotten his hands on you.
A violent shiver ran up my spine. Was it true? I would have died?
Wait a minute. This girl knows about the Demon Lord's heirs?
Yes. Hilariously enough, she was set to marry one of them, as you can see from her garb.
As Diana motioned towards my dress, I realized how vulnerable I was and felt extremely self-conscious. I wrapped my arms around myself as Diana let out a sigh.
Well, since you do not belong here, the obvious thing to do is to send you home.
I couldn't help but stare wide-eyed at Diana. She was really going to send me home? Really? I couldn't believe my ears. You'll really send me back?
Of course. It should be easy to do once everything is in order. It'll be like you never left the human world.
Wait, like I never left the human world? What do you mean by left the human world? Diana stared before chuckling softly and gesturing to the room and the beings within it.
Dear, do you not realize where you are? You are in the demon world.
My mind went blank. It couldn't be. I couldn't be in the demon world. No way. No way in hell. I felt myself back up against the wall behind me, suddenly afraid. I was in another world? How? That was impossible! Diana stepped towards me, both of her hands softly trying to show me she meant no harm as she positioned them in front of her body.
Do not panic. We will send you back now, so there's nothing to worry about.
How will you power the spell? Bringing someone here is no easy task, but sending someone back consumes much more energy.
I'll use what energy I have now and rest. We can organize the siege another time when I fully recover. It's not like the Demon Lord can escape the corner we've trapped him in, so we do have some time to spare.
You'd waste time and energy on this human. We must strike now while the Demon Lord is weakened.
But the human doesn't belong here. She needs to go home.
Shall I prepare the return spell?
Do. I grant you permission to use my energy to power the spell.
With a nod, the lanky man held out his hand towards the wall. I looked over in the direction it was aimed at. Diana's shadow? I watched as Diana's shadow simply stood against the wall, mirroring the movements of the real succubus in the room. Before my eyes, the shadow began to morph and expand on the wall on its own. I looked back to see Diana, to see her wrapping her arms around herself and curling her shoulders over as if she was in pain. Her nails embedded themselves into her forearms, and I could barely make out a painful hiss escaping her clenched teeth. Was the spell hurting her that badly? I turned back to the wall to see Diana's shadow shaken and vibrating, as if it was resisting the change the man was forcing on it.
You will obey my command. Open the gates to the void, and allow passage to the world we seek.
Transitum per renan quieto tranibes. Ubi aperiut. Iano eu. Residio.
Upon Diana's final word, her shadow burst and expanded into an oval-shaped doorway. I stared wide-eyed as the passage before a hand placed itself on my shoulder, forcing me to look over. The one with the spear gently pressed my shoulder forward and looked down at me with an almost stern face.
You must leave now. The faster you leave, the quicker we can close the void.
Go! Go! Go get married!
I quickly nodded and lifted the bottom of my dress, stepping forward to make a run for the passageway. However, before I could bolt towards my freedom, a snarl echoed through the room.
How dare you interfere with my summoning!
At the very moment, Diana began to scream, arcing her spine and throwing her head back. Around her body were red-tinted bolts of lightning, flashing and shocking her form.
No! Human! Use the passage! Now!
He didn't have to tell me twice. I bolted towards the portal, diving forward as I neared it, but I was forced back by a burst of energy and a flash of red light. I fell to the floor, almost slamming my head onto the stone.
A human will never, ever leave this world alive! You spineless worm!
Close the portal! The Demon Lord might get through!
But the human...
Close it!
As commanded, the man pulled his hand back, visually forcing his arm back behind his body, and Diana's shadow quickly began to morph back into a simple shadow. The electricity around Diana faded away as she began to tip forward. The man with the spear dropped his weapon and caught Diana in his arms, cradling her to his body as she panted and gasped for air.
I don't sense the Demon Lord anywhere.
The worm has to scurry through the shadows to try and fight back. He'll be dead soon enough.
How is she, guard?
Diana seemed to look uninjured, but her body was twitching from the aftermath of the magical attack. Her visible eye was shut tight as she dug her fingers into the guard's jacket to cling to him. As her eye opened, I saw not a blood ruby red color, but I saw a cold and unfriendly golden color painted over her iris. Her mouth opened as she panted for air, and I could see her hunger in her facial expression. She continued to stare at the wall, not wanting to make eye contact with anyone. Oops.
There are no physical wounds, but she's been weakened. I must give her my energy so she can recover.
The man swiftly moved and hooked an arm underneath Diana's knees, lifting her up bridal style as she clung to his jacket, shivering. The spear that had fallen to the floor faded into black and purple mist as he quickly left the room with her in his arms. My mind, however, began to panic. I couldn't go home? Why was I being forced to stay? Damn the Demon Lord, this wasn't right!
There's an imp in the castle. That is the only way the Demon Lord could have been able to interfere.
You! Guards by the door! Hunt it down!
A pair of guards that were apparently by the door saluted the one commanding them and ran off. I felt out of place, alone, terrified as to what was going to happen. The Demon Lord wanted me here, and his words pounded at my mind. How was I going to get home? Would I ever be able to go home?
Hey.
I looked up to see the winged person hovering near me before they moved and sat on their knees on the stone ground beside me.
We'll get you home, okay? Diana just needs a little rest, okay? She needs more than rest. She needs to use a different spell to send her back. The Demon Lord will expect her to use the shadow spell again.
How about the normal way? I'm sure we can connect to a witch, or even the warlock she used before, to reopen a portal to the human world.
The warlock she used to get to the human world died, remember? And he was the most powerful warlock in the human world, practically a god himself. What other human could be used to open a portal without another human dying?
It was merely a suggestion. The faster we get this human home, the faster we can move on and finish off the Demon Lord.
Well, what are we going to do with the human now?
We can give her a room to rest in. Humans need sleep after all. Maybe by the time she wakes up, we'll think of a solution. Come.
The woman with the rabbit ears looked down at me and lowered her hand to me, inviting me to take it. She had a kind but concerned expression on her face, so I trusted her. I slowly took her hand and began to stand up as the fairy figure brushed off the small patches of dust that had accumulated on my dress. I couldn't do anything. I was forced to listen to the beings around me because there was nothing else I could do. Without them, I couldn't go home. My heart ached, but I had to accept my predicament.
Here, I'll bring you to the open ambassador's room. You are free to rest there for now.
Okay. I was led out of the room and into the hall. I kept my eyes down, trying to take in more of the situation I was in. I was trapped in the demon world, and Diana was out of commission. The Demon Lord had plans for me, but what exactly was he aiming for? I could have been bait. I could have been revenge. I didn't know, nor could I figure out right now. At least I was safe. At least I hoped I was safe. The woman led me to the room that had practically screamed medieval fantasy. Everything was clean, but it still had that old age feel, as if no one had ever stepped foot in the room until that moment.
Rest here for now. When Diana is well again, we can discuss what to do.
Thank you. I nodded to the woman before she gently curtsied and left, closing the door behind her. I took a moment to observe my surroundings, interested in understanding the aesthetic. This was fantasy turned into reality. It was like I had gone back in time. Why, though? Was the demon world really that behind in the times, or did magic supersede technology and this was the result? Despite the situation I was in, which was beyond heartbreaking and terrible, my curiosity began to fester in my mind, and as if I was given a golden opportunity to learn something new. However, my thoughts began to drift, and I felt myself becoming weak and dizzy, no doubt from the shock and trauma I had gone through. I stumbled towards the bed, needing to sit down and let everything settle in without passing time. As my rear hit the mattress, however, I let out a small pleasured sigh. Holy crap, this is a comfy mattress! I felt myself fall back and my entire body simply melted into the softness beneath my body. It was like I was sleeping on a cloud. Was that possible? Demon magic may have had something to do with it, but I was certain that I was drifting into an almost blissful sleep just by lying on the blankets and mattress. Not caring that I was still in my dress, I closed my eyes and drifted asleep. I needed the rest, since Diana wouldn't be available for a while anyway. Darkness surrounded my mind, my dreams remaining silent and hushed in the cool, calm black. No nightmares appeared and no sounds were made. I was simply resting, and that was all my body needed. Since I'm in the demon world, does that mean I can't dream? Maybe. I let my thoughts wander into my subconscious, thinking about what was going to happen now. What would the boys do when they realize I'm gone? What would he do? I imagined him finding a way through the demon world and pulling me back to where I belonged, wrapping his arms and swearing to never let me go. I would be relieved, and we would be married just as we planned. How unrealistic was that? I had to be realistic right now. I was stuck, and the only one who seemed to be able to send me back was Diana and her companions, whoever they were. I had to trust them whether I liked it or not. Eventually I did rise from my sleep, somehow fully refreshed and calm. How could that have been?
Did you have a good rest?
I turned my head to see Diana at the door, arms crossed and leaning against the door's archway. She had a look of concern and pure curiosity on her face as she waited my answer. Yeah.
Good. A good rest is always important, especially to humans.
What about demons?
We rest as well, but it's not sleep like you humans do. We simply rest with our eyes open.
Why?
It's easier to avoid getting killed when your eyes are open.
I gulped. Were demons really that paranoid, or were they paranoid for a reason? Diana shook her head and stepped into the room, closing the door behind her.
So we need to find another way to get you back to the human world. It won't be easy, but I believe it can be done by tonight at the latest.
Tonight? Really? Diana nodded and crossed her arms again, leaning on one hip.
It will take time to get our shadow agents to gather the necessary supplies, but they are not hard to obtain, being that we're in a position of power. You must be lucky.
What do you mean? Diana sighed before casting a short spell under her breath. In front of me appeared a floating map, almost like a hologram. It is not a floating planet. This is not the castle in the sky. It showed an entire world where mountains, plains, and forests, and it all was surrounded by sea and water. Diana pointed at a marker that had a purple banner at its tip. It was marked in the center of some mountain and forest area. It was also the very center of the map.
That is where we are currently, the center of the abyssal plains.
Diana then ran her fingers in a circle around the marker, showing a perimeter around it.
Everything we need for the spell is within this area. It will just take time to gather the materials and prepare it.
I nodded, understanding the situation. I was going to hopefully be able to go home tonight, which is better than not going home at all. So, what should I do until then?
My suggestion? Stay in this room. I can mark this room as off-limits so that no demon may enter that would confuse you for an intruder and kill you.
I gulped. I did not want to die. As Diana made the magical map disappear, she shrugged.
However, I cannot stop you from whatever you wish to do. Just don't leave the castle.
I nodded as she turned to leave. As she stepped out, Diana looked back to me with a reassuring look.
We'll get you back to the human world. I promise you that.
Finally, she left me alone in the room. I let out a small sigh and looked up at the ceiling. I had to wait until tonight to actually do anything. What was I going to do? Part of me agreed with Diana's suggestion, wanting to stay in the room and be safe in case the guards didn't know who I was and would kill me on sight. My curiosity, however, wouldn't leave me alone and wanted to explore the castle, I was handed an opportunity to explore a castle in the demon world, and part of me did not want it to go to waste. I was torn on what to do. I've already explored every place, so I'm just going to stay in the room. It was better to be safe than sorry. I fell back onto the bed and closed my eyes, contemplating taking a nap to make it go by faster. Staying in my room was the best option for me, both so that I wouldn't get lost and that I would be okay in case the guards were on duty. I let out a small sigh before looking around the room. Was there anything I wanted to look at closer?
Excuse me.
Bunny! That's probably not her name, but I just call her Bunny. Before I could find anything, I looked to the room toward the voice. Peeking in was the rabbit woman, cautiously remaining behind the door while looking at me.
Are you feeling okay?
Huh? Yeah, I am, thank you. Please, come in. I trusted this woman, despite barely knowing her. She assisted me in coming to this room, and she was one of Diana's comrades, so I felt that I could put my trust in her. The woman nodded before stepping into the room and closing the door behind her. She turned to me and stood by the door.
I'm assuming Diana told you about the situation.
Yeah, I'll be back home tonight. That's the hope anyway.
Yes. We sent our agents as soon as we knew what we had to gather. We're positive they will turn up before nightfall, and we'll be able to cast a gateway spell.
I nodded and let out a small sigh. It would be a long wait, but it would be worth it if it worked. The woman, however, took a step forward.
May I ask you something?
I looked to the woman and slightly confused. Sure, go ahead. What is it?
Well...
I watched as the woman reached up and rubbed one of her ears, almost in nervousness. What was she nervous about? Finally she spoke again, releasing her ear.
Would you mind if I asked you about the human world?
Aww! The human world? Why was she so curious about the human world? She was a demon that looked like an anthropomorphic rabbit. The woman hugged her large staff against her body as she shrugged.
How are things like in the human world? Is there equality amongst your races? I've only heard stories, but since you're a human yourself, you would know.
That's a complicated answer. I would like to say that there is equality, but there's supposed to be equality, but sometimes it's complicated. My mind ran back to the social life of the human world. At least in America, we claimed to be equal, but we had major prejudice against our races, whether we liked it or not. I found myself to be on a neutral ground, not wishing to be an extreme on either opinion, but knowing the difference between what was morally right and wrong. I looked to the woman and shook my head, making her eyes widen slightly. We're not exactly equal. I mean, we try, but we're pretty divided. However, it's only one of many problems we face. The woman nodded before walking over and sitting down on the bed beside me.
I see. Are there major wars fought because of it?
Yes. In a way, we have marches and movements, but at least we try not to escalate it to war where I live. It's better to resolve things without violence.
That's smart. I hope that equality can be found in your world.
Yeah. What about here? The woman shook her head, her smile turning a bit grim. I could tell that things were rough here, just from looking at her expression.
We have sort of a caste system here. What kind of demon you are determines what life you live. Demons of Lilith like Diana are usually royals and nobles, while animal demons like me are much, much lower in the ranks.
Oh. I could hear her anger and shame just from her voice alone. Were things really that bad here? That's horrible. I'm so sorry.
It's alright. That's why I joined the rebellion. We intend to make changes, make it better. I want to be part of that and help fix things.
There was a confidence in her voice and her words that didn't match the look in her eyes. She knew something was off in what she said, but she expressed it anyway as a reply to me. I didn't know whether or not to be to prod her keep silent. I wouldn't be here long, so I decided to keep my mouth shut. The woman shook her head out as if she was scattering the thoughts from her mind and looked at me.
So, you are getting married. You must be excited to get back with your family and soon-to-be partner.
Huh? Oh, yeah, I'm excited to go back. For a brief moment, I had nearly forgotten that I was getting married. My mind began to wander to the one that was waiting for me, making my heart ache. As I looked down at my lap, the rabbit woman looked down as well.
I'm sorry. I didn't mean to make you upset. But you will be home soon.
I nodded. I shouldn't have let it get to me. But I really did miss being in the human world. I think anyone in my situation would understand, especially since I was a bride. I looked at my hand, seeing my engagement ring and imagining the wedding ring that was made for me replacing it. Soon enough, it would be on my finger, and I would be able to continue my life as normal. Pulling myself out of my thoughts, I looked at the woman as she stood and bowed to me.
Well, I shall leave you be. I will bring food whenever it is ready, so that you don't starve.
Thank you, I appreciate it. With that, the woman left, leaving me alone in my room to wait. I remained in my room until the night came. I was given food which looked like soup. The woman who gave it to me apologized, letting me know that the food was scarce until the upcoming harvest, which was a couple of days away. Being that I was only staying the day, I didn't mind much. I was more concerned over what I was given to eat. It was some sort of stew with mysterious chunks swimming in its broth. It smelled surprisingly good, but who knew how it tasted? Ruth. No way I know how. I was not in the mood to try out new things after what I had been through, and this was not something I wanted to try at all. A knock rapped on my door, breaking me out of my train of thought. Huh? Come in! The door opened to reveal Diana with a plate holding things I recognized, bread and cheese. I let out a heavy sigh of relief before Diana laughed.
I suggest not trying that. As good as it smells, the taste would not sit well with you.
Instantly, I moved the bowl to the nearby table, thankful that I did not have to try it. Diana handed me the plate and nodded, reassuring me that what was on it was indeed what it seemed.
It's not much, but it's human food. Eat up.
I will. I began to chow down, feeling the hunger in my stomach dissipate with each bite and swallow. The food I was drinking, surprisingly, was delicious. As I began to crave something to drink, Diana chuckled and formed a small goblet in her hand, filled with clear liquid that I assumed to be water. I took it and drank it down, feeling my thirst quenched before I let out a sigh. I feel so much better.
I can tell. Take a moment to finish eating, then we'll head for the ritual.
I looked up at Diana, suddenly excited. Everything was prepared for? Was it possible to go home now? As if she read my mind, she smiled and nodded.
We finished the main preparations. We just need to head over and we'll start.
I couldn't continue eating. My mind went into an obsessive frenzy of wanting to go home. I stood up, moving the plate and goblet to the nearby table. Let's go.
Huh? Are you sure?
I nodded, not wanting to waste any more time. I needed to get home, and I was tired of waiting. Diana stared before nodding and heading for the door, opening it for me and exiting after me. As she closed the door behind her, I began to feel my heart flutter in relieved joy. I was heading home. Diana led me down the corridors to the war room where I had originally arrived to reveal the table covered in plants and artifacts of different kinds. None of it made sense to me, but I had only assumed that it was what it was needed for the spell to work. Diana walked to the table and took a note of what she saw, nodding.
This should work.
You're in doubt?
Have to be after the last time we tried sending her home. Do we have a human anchor?
No, you're on your own this time. But we'll make sure you survive casting it.
This spell should work, however, because we'll be using energy material. It will only require a slice of your energy on top of these items, which your guard can refill immediately after this.
Just make sure you don't die casting it.
Diana smiled at her guard before turning to me.
So, are you ready to return home?
She didn't have to ask. I'm ready. Diana nodded once more before turning back to the table. She lifted her arms over the surface and lowered her head, muttering under her breath.
Otrunibris portas, apriat nobis, largiatur excidium, desiderium.
As she spoke, the table began to glow as she did. A dark purple aura began to surround her form as she lifted and arched her head back, staring at the ceiling. A glimpse of her eyes made me gasp. Warm golden orbs covered her blood-red irises, glowing with magic. She was deep within the spell, and I could see it slowly draw energy from her body. The items on the table began to gleam wildly, light orbs floating from them and dancing in the air above the table's surface. They began to weave back and forth with each other, almost as if the lights were dancing to a silent tune. The other demon stepped back as Diana moved her arms up and pointed to the dancing lights. Her fingers pointed into the air, leading the lights to follow where it directed obediently. She drew a large circle in the air, and the lights followed like a perfect trail, spreading out and forming a large void in the air. As they finally stopped moving, they burst into a bright light, causing the demons and I to cover our eyes from it. It engulfed the room, but died down just as fast, revealing a small tear in the air. Diana quickly leaned forward and dug her hands into it before pulling the tear apart, revealing my bedroom! Diana continued to pull the tear open, giving enough space for me to jump through.
Hurry and go through! This is your chance!
I wasn't going to let it go to waste. I gripped the bottom of my dress and rushed forward, using momentum to jump into the air and forward towards the void. I could almost reach it. I could feel the air conditioning of my room right at my fingertips.
She will never leave this world alive!
The Demon Lord's voice rang through the air just as I saw my fingertips pass through the tear. What stopped the rest of my body was a red light and force, forcing me and Diana back from the opening. I felt my body fly backwards and slam into the wall before I landed on the stone ground. I heard Diana as well land beside me with a painful thud. I looked up and felt my heart break as the tear became wrapped in red lightning, zipping itself closed and vanishing into thin air. No. No, this could not be!
Damn it!
That should have worked! How could it have failed?
We must have missed something. Was there anything we had forgotten?
No. I verified everything myself.
Then why was the Demon Lord able to overpower a gate spell?
I highly doubt you know either, brute.
Stop fighting! We need to make a plan and all of you are just being stupid! Stupid, 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 stupid!
Are you alright, Isaiah?
I'm fine.
I was too lost in my mind to fully understand what was going on around me. I was so close. I felt the other side. I had almost made it home. Why couldn't I go home? Diana's grunt of pain next to me made me shoot my head towards her, and I watched her slowly push herself off of the ground and glare at the table.
The Demon Lord must have done something more than simply bring her here.
What could he have done?
The Demon Lord is incapable of doing anything of the sort. His lackey imps must have done something to her.
A spell?
A curse.
I looked to the rabbit woman, seeing her stare wide-eyed at me. The other demons stared at me as well, and suddenly I felt like I was on display. Was something wrong with me?
She will not leave the demon world alive. He must have placed some sort of curse on her to prevent her from leaving this plane. In order to leave, she'd have to die.
What? My mind went blank. Did the Demon Lord really curse me? Was I forced to stay in this world until I died? I could never go back?
Are you suggesting a barrier curse?
That would explain the red energy that sealed the tear.
But dark magic like that requires
The blood of 1,000 demons. He must have sacrificed part of his army to cast a curse on her that would prevent her from leaving.
Charger.
The Demon Lord is that desperate for her.
The only way to break that kind of curse is to kill the caster, the Demon Lord himself.
she's trapped here. Until this war is over.
My body began to shiver violently. The Demon Lord killed 1,000 demons just to trap me here. Why? Why? I slammed my fist into the ground and began to scream. I want to go home! Why? I could feel the sympathy and anger in the room, but I didn't care. I was beyond livid, and I was far past broken. I was seeing red. I can never scream, ah! As my voice ripped through the air, a bright light erupted through the room once again. Everyone covered their eyes, but Diana quickly scrambled to get on her knees and covered me with her body. She held me tightly as the light invaded the space and slowly began to fade. As the light finally died, everyone moved their hands to see what had happened. In the air was a white tear that was slowly opening, facing towards the table. Something was coming. I could feel it in the air. The guard summoned his spear and pointed it at the tear, glaring at it and gritting his teeth.
Something's coming!
In reply, Diana summoned what looked like a saber and placed it in front of us.
Ready yourselves! It could be the Demon Lord!
The other demons in the room readied themselves and stared at the tear, ready, either holding a weapon or preparing a spell. I felt the air change, becoming heavier as the tear began to grow. The energy around it began to pulsate, making everyone in the room that much more tense. I stared at the tear as well, frightened as to what was coming. Was it the Demon Lord? His minions? My mind began to cycle through fearful ideas of what was about to appear. My heart almost stopped. Fallen from the tear and landing on the table were the 5 Incubi brothers. They were piled on top of one another, having coming through one at a time. However, as the last brother landed, the boys fell to one side, toppling off of the table and landing on the floor. The rebels around me stared at the fallen pile of Incubi, confused and surprised. As the tear in the air closed, the ogre man was the first to lower his sword.
What the hell?
Who are they?
Careful! They could be the Demon Lord's men!
No! The rebels looked to me as I stood up, Diana following, still protecting me, and I stared at the boys on the ground. They all looked dazed and a bit shell-shocked from having fallen twice in rapid succession. I almost couldn't believe it. There they were, right in front of me. My mind couldn't help but remember how I had first met them. They had all been on the floor of my mansions, unconscious and wounded. Now they were in front of me in the demon world. I know them! I stared at the one I was meant to marry, seeing him slowly shake his head and rise from the ground. They came to rescue me. He came to rescue me. My heart became overjoyed and full of warmth and happiness. I was going to go home. The question was, how?
That's enough for you, human! Oh, you gonna cry? Suck it up! Yeah! See you in the full game.
I guess that concludes the Seduce Me to the Demon War demo. Thank you so much for watching. And thank you so much for the 270-some subscribers. Yay! Oh, that was a lot. I'm tired. Alright. As I was saying before, bye!